Hello there, and welcome, Virtual Space Hero community, on this beautiful Thursday. I hope that you're all doing well. Let us know where you're connecting from in the chat function of the platform you are connecting from. You know that we are live streaming to our main platform, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook, as always, every week with content around the virtual space, virtual experiences, virtual learning, and virtual teams and presentations. Today, I'm really excited because we're continuing to go back a little bit to the roots of virtual space here. We have been discussing a lot about virtual teams and hybrid organizations in the past weeks. And today, I'm going back also to my roots as an educator, because I've been teaching and working in academia for many years. And so, of course, I've been thinking about how to make my sessions more powerful than the usual sessions, maybe in an academic context. And today, I have somebody with me on this stage who has been thinking about the same thing, but way before I did. And with this, I'm already super happy to welcome on my stage Adriano Pianesi, connecting from Washington, D.C. Hi there.
How are you doing, Barbara? Thank you for inviting me. A pleasure to be here.
Hi, Adriano. I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks a lot for taking the time in your full calendar and to discuss with me the art of online hosting, from PowerPoint to powerful. That's our topic for today. And I'm really excited because, as you know, when I wrote to you on LinkedIn, you know that I was following you on LinkedIn. I read one of your articles from 2011 about the topic that we're discussing today. So you were somebody who has been discussing this, or has been looking into the today's topics way before Corona and way before many of us. So let us know a little bit, how did you come and combine your experiential leadership topic, which you're also an expert in, with the topic of online hosting and the virtual space?
Thank you, Barbara. I have to say, you're very kind. I mean, I have been, the merit goes a lot to my co-writer. As you know, I wrote it with Amy Lenzo. Amy, I love you. Nice to see you. I hope you're listening to this. And we wrote this together because at the time we look around and very few people were doing online meetings. And so we said, you know what, maybe there is something here. We have a contribution to make. So we start thinking, what can we say about our way of doing those meetings that can help others? And that's how the article was written, pretty much listening and talking to each other. And so in a sense, it was almost a document of our connection and collaboration profession. And when we wrote it, you're right, very few people were doing online stuff. I opened my account on Adobe Connect on 2007 and 8, I think. And it was embarrassing because when you would ask companies if they would like to do something online or virtual, they would say no, openly no. We don't have the capacity of the technology or even the patience to try. So it's been exciting.
And so how did you start? Because when you opened up your Adobe Connect in 2008 or 7, what was your first project? Why did you really do it?
So we were trying, I mean, the truth is I was working with a group that did not have enough funds to actually meet face-to-face. And so that was an alternative, which is, brought me in a sense to one of the power that we have right now with this technology, that if you're concerned about environmental conservation, if you are geographically dispersed, or if you're interested in germinating ideas of many, many people, and if you do not have a lot of resources, this tool of online meetings is an incredible power in your hands. With the click, you can actually convene. I did an event 3 months ago with 350 people all together brainstorming on the same topic. I mean, there is an incredible power that is now available to us. I'm curious to see what's going to happen when everybody, as they say, go back to normal. A cliche I cannot stand. But I would be interested to see what happened after this pandemic as far as those kind of situations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really interesting because what you were saying, like the possibility for us to gather more often geographically dispersed teams, or to space our virtual learning journey, is the same thing that we've been discussing with many different guests here on my virtual space here, LinkedIn live show. I think this is tremendous, because it opens up so many possibilities for us as leaders, as trainers, as managers, as facilitators. That is very, very powerful to use a little bit your word there. But let us jump directly into the topic. What does hosting mean for you? What are the characteristics of a good host for you?
I am, I have to say, I've always been deeply impressed with this idea of collective creativity. When kind of an orchestra is able to create this incredible piece of art, or when a soccer team, plays so well that it looks like everybody's joining together, or when a dance is choreographed in a way that make you wonder, how is this even possible? So I've always been wondered by that, and that is the reason why thinking about that is, how do we unleash collective creativity? And so for me has always been that kind of, how do we unleash and create collective genius, group genius? And that attempt, that has been my guiding questions. And I know for a fact that I attend a lot of meetings where that collective genius is not unleashed, when that kind of capacity is not present. And so what I have tried to do is so in a sense, I'm also very worried why those meetings do not manage, to create those magic moments. And that has been, and hosting for me has been an answer to that question. Hosting meaning ultimately a kind of personal attitude when you're convening people, and also an attitude that is basically rooted in a stance towards what are your thoughts about others. A quick example: if I see myself as the expert and other people as bottle to fill, hosting doesn't make any sense. And that is not, we haven't even started to talk about how to do it, because I think when it comes to hosting, and I think this is common in everybody, and a professional like you probably knows this super well. I deal with that every day. The purpose is the most important thing. Why are we gathering? Why are we coming together? And so out of that purpose, I realized that collective creativity is unleashed when the attitude of the person that invite people is not an attitude of presenter, but an attitude of a host.
Absolutely. And I think what you're mentioning here is like the purpose, whether it is a meeting, whether it is a workshop, whatever
Correct.
kind of virtual gathering it is, the purpose needs to be clear. And I think it's very interesting, because when I work with organizations, I work a lot with now organizations that want to adopt a more hybrid model. And one of the things that we're discussing a lot is, why do you have recurring meetings? It is like a meeting should be done or scheduled, to say so, when there is a purpose, when there is a question, when there is a need. And I think one of the problems, the challenges is that we already had like this super meeting marathon before Corona, just in presence in our organizations. And the problem is there is nothing worse than bad normal meetings. It's bad virtual meetings. And that's what we're having a lot now since past year, right?
I am truly shocked in my work. I mean, I'm helping a few clients like you are, moving into the future of work. And the truth is that sometimes just the act of rethinking what is the purpose of a meeting, it's an actual incredible act of leadership, because people do rethinking their purpose of the meeting, which forces you to confront, for example, what is the ideal outcome, forces you what are activities that are aligned to create that outcome, and more importantly, why are people joining us?
Absolutely. So if we think about that, what would you say are the characteristics of a good host? How would you describe a good host?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this question a lot. I think that the difficult part of hosting is truly let it go, because we have, and I think personally, one of the thing that moved me towards this path. I've been in business for almost 20 years and teaching for Johns Hopkins for almost 15. We have been, I think what I have truly mastered is the ability to listen. And when I say this, I talk about Jane Vella classic book about teaching, learning to listen, learning to teach, which was, one of my entry into the art of experiential teaching. Listening is truly the most difficult thing to do when you're convening or teaching or hosting a meeting. And that part, it's really the one that for me is essential in a host. Then, of course, there are other things which are related to other skills, but I would say this ability to, in a sense, renegotiate your authority in a meeting in a way that is, aligned with the purpose, with the big why of people are coming. I think that's, in a nutshell, is the definition of a host.
I think it's fantastic what you mentioned. I had a fantastic conversation last year with Joel Silverstone, also connecting from the US, and we were talking about how can listening, or how you improve to be a good listener, improve the trust in your virtual team.
Yeah.
And he gave a lot of very good concrete exercises, small things that you can do as a leader of a team in order to improve your listening skills, because there is so much we waste and we disengage our team by not really listening to them. Exactly.
Funny that you're saying that, Barbara, because I'm experimenting with a course on this very topic that is delivered through an app, through microlearning. So there are no lectures, there are no PowerPoint, there is just microlearning activities through the course of 6 weeks. And and then you meet with your cohort for an hour once a week. But it's an incredible opportunity to work on those kind of skills in a very different way.
Absolutely. I can totally understand that. Fantastic. So let's dive into, let me ask you a very concrete question. If we talk about virtual hosting. So we want to talk about powerful virtual hosting. What do we need to consider before, during, and after, whatever kind of virtual gathering it is, whether it is a meeting, it applies probably also to a training, it applies also to a virtual event, correct?
Yes, that's right. This is something that is common to all of this. To do this, I would like to share with you a little bit how I do it. And, we start normally with this concept that, we have to do information and we have to share information. And that's the main focus of our event. And then, of course, we do presentation, PowerPoint, and we put together information that way. Now, this is not how I work. I don't work like that at all. I start with another concept. You were asking me before and after. Before I decide what to do before and after, because let's be honest, I could keep this idea of information and presentation and then now send an email before, and then after send another email. This would be a before and after. But what I actually do is I completely rethink the whole thing as an experience. And so I put first the participant. I start thinking, who is coming to this? And I think about what do they need? And then I think, what is the journey that they're in? And how can I help them in this journey, in these experiences? What kinds of success are these people really looking to obtain with this event? And then, of course, based on that, I design then the purpose and the goal of the meeting. So again, try to understand the why. So in a sense, I start with who, and then I go straight based on that of thinking with the why. Now, another thing that might seems interesting, but very few people think, is I am, I started my work with the World Cafe for large group methods. And so there is which taught me the importance of creating the right atmosphere. And that means that the room setup, whether it's virtual or online, is absolutely essential, because the venue ultimately, and when I say venue, I say much more than just Zoom or Adobe Connect or whatever tool you're using. The venue is really critical to actually define what the purpose is. So once I do this, I am then ready to move into, the more specific and the design. And so I design those events using questions. So I don't design using activity. I ask, what are the important questions that this event or meeting or training should address? What are the stories that should be shared that could bring people to this level of knowledge? And then I design what are the activities, the what we will be doing of the event. And of course, this event, I teach leadership development and organizational change, is often based on group work and in tapping into group dynamics. What one of the power of this of the virtual method is that it provides a lot of space for reflection.
Absolutely.
And so this has been another way for me, in a sense, to actually multiply the effect of what this new way of teaching can do for me.
That is absolutely fantastic. Thanks so much for showing also how you engage differently, because just the way that you were using the second camera, the document camera, whatever you have there, plus the cards, it was already something that totally differently that can engage differently to your audience. Thank you so much for
I have to say, I use that a lot because, I mean, the truth is that, I mean, what I do in class is rather different. Let me show you something, because so you have a sense of the atmosphere that I show when I do in class. I mean, those are my classes. As you can see, this is not your typical academic environment or organization where you teach. So I do work that is very interactive. You know, it's really based on bringing together in the room the best way for people to work together. And so with this kind of mindset, you know, you have this incredible power in collective knowledge, which would be wasted with a PowerPoint presentation.
Super powerful ideas that you already brought on the table here. Thank you so much for sharing. I also just want to pick up on one thing, and that is also something that I've been discussing with previous guests here on the show, and it is the power of reflection. Whether it is a meeting or whether it is a virtual learning journey, a training that you're designing, we have, through the virtual space and through the possibilities of spacing a virtual a journey, we have so many possibilities to build in reflection activities that we do not really have before in present settings. Because who is going to fly us in like every 3 weeks, right, Adriano?
I mean, I have to say, this has been a real interesting topic for me, because I teach students online also in university course, and a lot of my courses are in the area of leadership. So clearly, I have this task of teaching those leadership ideas to people online. And so I realized that the ability to reflect and introspection, it's an ability that needs to be developed, that cannot be assumed. And so I start providing more and more guidance to my students about how to reflect, because I found that, you know, we don't live in a society that really reward reflection of deep thoughts. We actually starts with this idea that this is about navel gazing and it's completely useless. You have to get straight into action, you know. And so my perspective, which is also informed by my study of leadership with Professor Eifetz, is to see things from the balcony. Professor Eifetz talked about this idea of stepping up and having a bigger picture, which is only possible if you reflect.
Absolutely right. And you know, I think it's very interesting what you're mentioning, because particularly the reflection aspects, we are also experiencing that in our teaching projects. I have one project that is the Global Case Study Challenge. The Global Case Study Challenge is a project of 600 students from across the globe gathering, or we are organizing a learning journey for them for 2 months. And they have to do a virtual team building, and in the second step, reflect on the virtual team building. And the reflection part is the one that is graded, because the team building, of course, it's neither recorded nor graded, but then they need to reflect on that virtual team building activity. And it's so interesting how many questions came up last year, because they need to record the reflection. We provided them even with reflection questions, but it was the biggest struggle was the reflective activity that we had designed in these 2-month journey with us.
I can share with you the form that I've created. I'm happy to share with you and with the larger group. I created this self-evaluation for your own reflection with 18 points, and trying to force students into this more, you know, productive reflection. Because, you know, a lot of students start beating themselves up or becoming completely lost into these dreams, that have no connection with reality, or just commenting and doing an opinion piece on their own life, which is not what reflection is all about. So I think it was really important to somehow provide some guidance.
Yeah, absolutely. I can understand that. And I think there are a lot of possibilities also afterwards. We're going to post the important links under the live stream so you can also access the material that we're talking about. So when we come back to think about, you mentioned a lot of things that you think about before the virtual gathering, whatever it is. So you think about the purpose, you think about the participants, their needs, what makes success for them. Then you think about the goals, the objectives. What else do you consider before, or then what do you do when it comes to open up the virtual gathering? How do we create that space of warmth and welcoming so that everybody feels invited, an inclusive virtual space? What do you do there?
Interestingly enough, I don't actually attend to that directly. So, in other words, my perspective is, I do this exercise in my leading change or leading systems. As leader, we work always with complex systems. So leading a system is very different than leading a person. You can convince a person, you can cajole a person, you can manipulate a person, but a system is very hard to manipulate. And so I ask this question: imagine you're at a party and the party is going down. For some reason, it's going down. People are being bored and you perceive this in the air. What would you do to actually change the party? And people have all sorts of ideas. But, the key concept here is the way you're thinking about that party generates the solution that you're going to apply. And so what I have noticed is that you have a better chance to create that warm atmosphere and engagement if you're thinking about every meeting that you have as inviting people for dinner. And so this is like a radical shift. When I asked this to my government client here in DC, it's kind of embarrassing because, the government has a very clear statement between personal and professional. But, the truth is, the moment you open up and start thinking of inviting people for dinner in your house, all of a sudden, the icebreaker, the stupid task, or the things that are not really essential, they fall on the wayside. Let me share something from the article that I wrote with Amy on what is actually, a way to do this.
Go ahead.
I mean, the first thing is, if I am inviting you, I'm interested in your idea, so I'm not going to be just the one talking. So I go from PowerPoint to powerful in the sense that I'm not going to just be the one talking. I can send you the PowerPoint ahead of time, and give you or even a recording ahead of time. I also, when I think about an event, especially online, I want to keep the technology simple. I want to try to make it not so hard for people to log in. I want to keep it as simple as possible. And this is the hardest part, which, is the other side of the coin of listening. You have got to talk less. I mean, and, the point is, we tend to act as stars of the show, in our event. And that is not really our role, I think. Another thing
I just want to add here something,
please.
Adriana. There is one quote that I love so much that I was introduced to by Joshua Davis last year. The one who is doing the talking is the one who is doing the learning. And I think that is such a powerful one. I understand that there are more people who said that in different ways, but it was the first time that I heard it last year, and I really love that quote.
Yeah, and the truth is, talking less is not just your own perspective. You're right. It's also very functional, because if you are talking, you're the one learning, and you're not there, especially if it's a workshop or a teaching session, you're not there for you to learn. You already know that stuff. Another thing that I do is, this seems weird, but, right now has become, I think, something that people can start understanding. The 95% of webinars I attend still today have the participant with muted line. So pretty much we don't have the right to talk, which is rather shocking to me. But that even post-pandemic times continues to happen. And there are so many reasons why this is so. I don't want to discuss those reasons. But the truth is, when you unmute the line, the magic happens because you start inviting people in the conversation. I mean, and another point very important is that you got to think, as I told you earlier, in the event as an experience. Therefore, when the event finishes, it doesn't really finishes. The work is not done. You continue to engage people in whatever they're doing. Because, ultimately, as we said earlier, the meeting has a purpose, and that purpose doesn't end with the session.
Absolutely. You were talking here also, you have a few more points here about technology. Would you like to say something about that? Because I think we didn't touch about that. Because I see that you are very technological. You're playing around with a lot of cameras. You have a super techy setup. Is there something else that you would like to add about this point?
Yeah, I just want to say that yes, it's true. I can put titles, I can do, this kind of tricks. But the truth is that this is just a new grammar that, it's pretty easy and straightforward. I mean, doesn't take a lot of skills to do what you're just saying. Because again, this is not the whole point. The point is, what is the purpose? In this particular situation, my purpose is not to bother the audience always with the same view, because I want to make this engaging. And so the real issue is not the special effects. The real issue is always and should always be the purpose.
I think that's a very good point, and it's also for those of us who have been starting to teach, to train, or to work virtually last year. And by mid of 2020, many of us were playing around with so many tools, and I've been in many sessions where it was just chaotic. Many people inviting to a mirror wall where nothing was happening, nobody could edit, to weird Google Docs around the space, and nobody could do anything. It's just about keeping it simple and making it accessible also for your learners, because it's not about technology, it's about the content, right? I think this is a very important point that you're making here as well, just confirming as well what many others practitioners and professionals in the field are saying.
Yes, I would say, because as you said, I was also in those meetings that you talk about that were very chaotic, especially at the beginning of the pandemic. But I have to also say that comfort is overrated. This concept, this idea of stays in your comfort zone, it's of being authentic. I don't really buy those ideas very much, because I think that this has been an incredible gym for everybody to try to test their virtual and online skills. So inevitably that comes with some mistakes. I am sure that, that person that sent you in the mural session and nothing was happening, I've not done that again the following time. The truth is, it's inevitable that there are those elements of learning and mistakes. What I think is truly, truly important is to continue to learn, because those are not technology that stop today and that's it. You have to continue to stay up. And again, always thinking, however, what is the best technology for our audience? In some situation, one time I worked with a nonprofit group in Ohio, and we did an entire session through the phone, through a conference line, because we wanted to simplify to the extreme. We didn't want the technology to get in the middle. Now, the first time you use Mural, I was involved with a group of scholars from Pakistan last year, and they'd never used Mural. They were shocked in the first hour and a half, but then after the second and third session, they became proficient. So I think it's inevitable.
Yeah, it's a good point that you're making here as well. Let me go to one other point, because we were talking about before, during. So what comes after? If we talk about after the virtual gathering, what is important for the after?
I have to say that the after part, I am a big fan of the before. I actually feel that the success of an event is 90% in what you're doing before the event, because it's your understanding of the why, your understanding of the purpose of the meeting, and is also, and especially, is your understanding that you're committing to gathering about something. And also, I like the purpose, because the purpose is also not static. We're meeting today after the election, for example, or we're meeting today before summer, or we're meeting. So the now is super important. I don't know, maybe because this comes, is not my stuff. This comes from the sustained dialogue theory of, Harold Sanders, which you probably know, which has those 5 elements: the who, the what, the why, the how, and the now, as the key element of any sustained dialogue. In that case, for, more conflict resolution kind of environment. But I would say that's why I am a big fan of the before the meeting. The after the meeting, for me, the critical element is to see, as I said earlier, if you understand the purpose, you understand that the meeting cannot be the whole purpose. The meeting is the beginning of getting something done. And so in some cases, the after is normally the action, something that we will try together, some experiments, that we do. And interestingly enough, this modality of experimentation is a modality that I also bring to difficult meeting. Because when I talk about virtual meeting, I don't want to give the impression that everything is hunky-dory and people have always the same opinion. I think that one of the problems of many people in my line of work is that we are very, very focused on love and not enough focus on power. But I think you need both to create a powerful meeting. And so what I have been experimenting is way to prototyping the action that come after the meeting. For example, having the same conversation 4 times, exactly the same conversation, but changing the role and giving people different perspective. Why do I do this? Because I know that if we iterate the same conversation 3 or 4 times, just changing the role, I will have a chance of a much, much better insight than just conversation 1 time. So I guess what I'm trying to say as an experiential leadership expert, experience is in everything, and until we talk about changing the world, we are all okay. But it's when we try to change the world that we really learn how to change the world. And so for me, if the meeting is a planning meeting, the next step is getting into action and see what we learn out of that action.
Thanks so much. It's a very, very, very important point that you're making here as well. Thank you so much, Adriano, again. So we talked about before, during, after. We talked about how can we shift from those presentation strategies to engagement strategies. You gave us a few hints on that. But now I want to combine a little bit, because you're an organizational change consultant, a leadership expert. And how do you combine this with the art of virtual hosting, the art of virtual gatherings?
So I'm an immigrant. I was born and raised in Italy with a master in organizational communication. And then I started a career as a manager. So I worked with large corporations, with Fortune 500. And eventually I became a consultant. As a consultant, I work in organization because I have been a manager. So I know what is on the other side. And then I became an academic. And I brought, as an adjunct for Johns Hopkins, this knowledge into the work that I do. Now, I'm an immigrant to the United States. So for me, issue of space or belonging or who you are or identity are really, really important. And so my work in organizational change often has started with the same principle of organizing a meeting, because you bring an organizational change perspective every time you say, what is the big question here? The questions that actually has the potential to create some inquiry and move our conversation from just a chit chat to a really collective inquiry, because that's what change, successful change is often, a collective inquiry. When a country decide to move towards what we hope a better way to deal with race, for instance, as has happened in the US in the last few months, the truth is we are asking a question. We're asking a question that doesn't necessarily have an answer, but we're living through the answer. What does it look like to live in a society where racial relations are not as conflictual, where people of color are not oppressed? I mean, this is the beginning of every change, rooted in a question. And so for me, organizational change starts with the creation of meetings where you create space for radical possibilities. And that is the reason why a lot of our conversation, Barbara, is not just about or hosting online meeting, but it's also about how do we come together as people in organization to make change happen.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Absolutely. If you think about the virtual meetings, how do we come together? Probably you have also had some sort of inspirations from books. What are the your favorite books if we talk about gathering or virtual meetings? Do you have something that you would like
You
to share with
know,
us?
in the last, as you are a master in this, so you know this very well. But I mean, how tough it is to elevate purpose, participation, and performance in a virtual environment, because we have very low expectation when we started this in this pandemic world, uh, what you can actually do online. And the truth is that people like me and you are on the trenches to try to show people possibilities for this space. So in a sense, we are ourselves in about creating this radical space for possibilities, and moving people on the other side. Well, I can tell you, there is a book that is for me was important because I met Juanita and David, and they have become my mentors. So the first book that I would recommend is The World Cafe, of course.
Yeah, fantastic.
Is a book that taught me a lot about convening and coming together and moving forward for real change. Another book that is very important for me because it attempt to see this more communal dimension rather than personal is Community of Peter Block. I mean, this is a book that, as you see, is about the structure of belonging, which I think it's a critical element of the work. And then finally, I read this lately, but it's a real jewel, which I recommend, is Priya Parker, The Art of Gathering. I mean, those are three books that I really recommend for anyone that bring people together. And again, a lot of what I have said here, I'm not the owner of those ideas. Those ideas that come from those people that have done this work before me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing also the book recommendation, which is fantastic. And for those of you out there, you can also subscribe. Priya Parker, for example, has a wonderful email newsletter where she also
Right.
always shares some ideas that are fantastic, and probably the other authors as well. And I would add one thing that for me is super important when it comes to how to facilitate virtual gatherings, whatever gatherings there are. It's probably liberating structures as a
Yes.
as 33 essential techniques on how you can unleash a different power as well in your organization.
Yeah, liberating structure. It's funny because that video I showed you before is about a video of one of those liberating structure in action. But yeah, it is true. I mean, in my work in organization, I have been doing a lot of work in my world in many several areas. I've been a speaker. I've been working. I've done TED Talk. I've done leadership development work. In all those situations, there is always an involvement of people, So if you do not learn how to gather people, how to be with people, it's very hard to do this work. That is the reason why a lot of what I have been doing in my life has been ultimately, as you know, my background is in leadership. So ultimately, but the reason is, I think that gathering is a form of leadership. That when you are focusing on creating communities for change, what you're committing is to a different form of power. It's no longer power over, the idea I have power over you, which it's one notion that people don't like, but it's power with. We're joining together for a collective purpose. And
Absolutely.
and I have to say that is ultimately the fight here. From power over to power with.
And this is fantastic because it's also, again, we have powerful in there, and there were many powerful ideas that you shared with us today. Thank you so much, Adriana. It was really a pleasure having you on this Virtual Space Heroes show. Thanks a lot for sharing all your ideas. And you know that I still have a virtual cocktail prepared backstage, so I'm joining you in a bit. Thank you very much for being with us.
A real pleasure. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you very much for being with us. And I cut off Adrian a little bit, but it was a thank you, a very warm one. Thank you very much for being with us out there. And thanks a lot also for sending in your questions beforehand. You know that you always have the possibility also to send in your questions if you cannot attend live, because so I pick them up during the live show. You also know that this LinkedIn Live is being streamed to LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook. We have a podcast, Virtual Space Hero podcast is available on several platforms. You can also find it out there. So for the more auditive ones, it is in a podcast version as well. And on the blog, as you know, there's always a short summary of each LinkedIn Live. Having said that, thanks again for joining us. Thank you for sending your questions beforehand. Don't miss next week's Virtual Space Hero LinkedIn Live. We're going to talk about something totally different. We're talking about virtual escape rooms. And I have a guest from the Netherlands who's showing us what he is doing in the virtual escape room world, and also what it has to do with leadership development. So with that, I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening. And I'm saying become a virtual space hero. Thank you. Bye.